Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lookout. Thanks for joining us. Today is the 9th of July. We're going to look at fires in Northern California, and we're going to look at all kinds of stuff going on. Not a lot of development on several of the fires we've been following, but one of them definitely took off today. Butler's kind of blowing up, and that's our cover photo that you've been looking at if you've been waiting to get on the broadcast. It's a kind of early in the afternoon shot of the Butler Fire that's seen from out close to the coast. So let me play our sponsors real quick, and then we'll jump into some mapping. Sponsored by QTAC, based here in Chico, California. They make slip-in pumps for trucks and UTVs, and they also make full-size fire trucks. They also use water axe pumps. Water axe are kind of the standard for high-quality wildland pumps. And kind of a newcomer in the fire equipment business, Firebox, based out of Anderson, California, build these really nice skid steer mounted fire pumps for putting on your Bobcat and settling the dust. All right, so today we've been doing our thing, looking at the webcams and looking at the data, and so we're going to jump into that pretty quick here and look at the fires we've been talking about. So we're going to talk about the Butler Fire, we're going to talk about the Green Fire, the Summit Fire, and then we're going to jump up into Oregon. There's a bunch of new fires there, and like we said last night, it's a little harder for us to get intel on the Oregon fires, so we don't get up to speed quite as quickly on what's going on up there. But let's just jump right into, we'll start with the Green Fire. Got something weird going on here with my... There we go. Okay, so Green has been burning here between Redding and Bernie, off of the 299, kind of between Montgomery Creek and Lakehead. If you go across through this kind of land that time forgot. And interesting thing that's been happening today on the Green Fire is that there seems to have been kind of with this. It's kind of the first really hot day in Redding, and the smoke is kind of packed in. So they mapped the Green Fire here. Not sure when that mapping was done. We're playing. I got a programmer helping me out with building some new tools to make it quicker for me to do my thing. So we're kind of working on those. Last night we were looking. The Green had kind of made a slope-driven run across the creek here and started to run up towards Brock Butte. What's happened for most of the day today is that it's been smoky, and so if we look at these satellite images, you can see here's the Green Fire, and in the past couple of days we've seen this kind of streak of smoke blowing downwind. And what we're not seeing that today is we're seeing that the smoke's kind of hanging in that zone, and that's kind of smothering the fire behavior. It's kind of, we talk about the lid staying on the pot when an inversion kind of never lifts, and so this big hot dome of high pressure that's sitting over California is kind of packing the heat in and packing the smoke in. You see over here at Butler really blowing up, and you can kind of see from the little shadow on that, you can tell there's a little pyrocumulus happening. And the smoke from Butler is actually coming all the way down. It's like on its way to, paradise, basically. And so you'll start smelling smoke probably down here in Chico from that fire this evening. But sometimes what happens is that smoke will actually shade out. You can see the shadow on the ground below that smoke column. I don't know if you guys can see the shadow there, but that shade is significant for affecting the burning conditions on other fires. So like the Hearst fire happened up here in 2018, it got smoked out by the Delta, or by the Carr fire for a while, and that really changed the outcome of that fire. If we look north into Oregon, we also have fire here that's kind of blowing up kind of north of Klamath Falls, and that's sending smoke down into NorCal. So in the kind of big picture today, we've got kind of more of a north wind. Let's jump into this, and you can see kind of there's a bit of a northwesterly influence. And so at least for the shoe fire, that's kind of packing its smoke back on top of it. and for Butler, it's kind of aligned it with the canyon. So when we look at what the green fire has done, as I said Shuba, I meant green, you can see the smoke is just kind of hung in, unlike yesterday. The smoke is just kind of hung in here on the green fire, and that's kind of inhibited the spread of the fire, and also you haven't had as much of the wind kind of blowing up the canyon to cause a kind of slope-driven run. So if we take another look at the green fire from kind of the north, you can see a lot of that smoke is just kind of hanging in kind of to the north of the fire. This is looking from the northwest. This is the view of the Butler Fire, which kind of went nuclear earlier today. You can see that's our cover photo. So around like 1:30, that fire just kind of went nuclear. So as far as we know, green crews are still, this is a good break for them, in that I was a little worried when it started to push last night towards Brock Butte that their timeline for getting these fire lines done might get pushed, and they might get chased out of there before they had time to get the fire lines. But it seems like it's not out of the question that they'll have time to get these fire lines in. So the strategy here is hand line up from the lake, and then dozer line where they can do it on this ridge. Here's Fender's Ferry Road, and so they're working on hand line and dozer line to tie in this kind of box. And so if they can get that done in time and get an opportunity to put fire on the ground here at night ahead of the fire's arrival, they might hook it there. Really depends on this. We've got like 5 days of really hot weather coming, and that hot weather sometimes does result in stable atmosphere and smoke packing in and kind of just unpleasantness on the ground, but not big explosive fire behavior. On the other side of the fire here, they're prepping this road that comes down from Chirpchatter Campground, and they're also putting in dozer line. I guess there's some cabins out in here that I've been hearing about in this next creek over. As far as I can tell, there's no proposed line to keep the fire from burning out on Bliss Peninsula, and we've talked about why that's actually a really good thing from the standpoint of the vegetation and the habitat and everything else needing fire, and that they've had a bunch of prescribed fire out here in the past decade that has kind of prepped it to receive fire. And we also talked about earlier, if you want to go back and look at earlier episodes, about how they don't have very many opportunities in this box at all. This is all roadless and not really any access for dozers. It's also a research natural area full of rare plants and some plants that are found nowhere else in the world. Once you get out in here, you've got a couple ridgetop roads, but right now there's nothing in their kind of strategy about controlling this west side of the fire, except they want to keep it north of the Pitt River, which is the Pitt River arm here of the lake. One thing I was talking to someone about today is just that this is a really unique forest type in California, in that you have a lot of oak. And so when we look at kind of the greens, the shades of green here, a lot of this is oak and kind of scrub, brush. And then these darker greens are like Douglas fir. And so both Douglas fir and oak kind of create not super flammable conditions under themselves. And I don't have any photos right now queued up to show you, but you can picture oak litter, oak leaves. It's kind of just, it's pretty clean under there. It's packed down. The leaves kind of pack down, and then the winter rains kind of pack them down more. And so it's not like pine needles or something that is really flammable. Oak litter and Doug fir litter both. They're not real conducive to kind of, it's not like just pure heavy brush. Another thing that's going on out here right now is that we're still fairly early in the burning season, and a lot of the brush in these landscapes is still growing in peak summer growth, and it's got a lot of moisture in it. And so we're not in critical fire conditions yet for brush or for kind of hardwood type forest until usually not till a little later in July. And so what you're going to see on this fire is the fire is going to be able to make runs like it did yesterday, where it's got slope and wind together. And so that kind of limits the opportunities on the landscape for this fire to make big runs. Like it could kind of run this drainage here, and it can kind of run this drainage here. And then when it runs either of those, then it's got let's just do something here. Picture red being hot burn and yellow being kind of backing fire or not as hot a burn. And so like this north slope here, that's going to be kind of out of the wind and kind of in the shade, and the fire is going to have to back down it once it runs up here. Same thing that's going on right now over here. Well, the fire made its run yesterday, and you can see that it kind of hung up on this ridge, and then sorry. This landscape here is north facing, and the fire has to back down into it. So it kind of sets the stage for this kind of pulses of fire activity across this landscape. So, you know, if you get a big day with big winds and instability, and the fire runs up here and it spots off into here and runs up here and it spots off here, and you have really dry conditions and really receptive fuels, you can get really long distance runs. But without that kind of sustained wind and sustained opportunities for the fire to be aligned with the wind and the fuels, you know, the fire is going to take its time, burn out on the next drainage, burn that out, burn down into here. And you've kind of seen that already on this fire, where if we look kind of back at the spread of it for several days, you see that it's kind of taken its time in burning out, and there's kind of these themes like that. Sorry, I got like way too many layers going here. Makes it a little hard to navigate. So if we look at where the fire had spread before, like you could see that it made a run up this face, and that was part of a day. You know, earlier in the fire, it ran this basin. So we're going to continue to see that on green, of it kind of running these basins kind of one at a time. So hot and dry doesn't necessarily mean explosive fire behavior. All right, so we're going to jump from green over to look at the Butler. On Butler, we don't have right up to the minute data, but we've got stuff that was, I think, captured earlier in the day. And that tells us a lot of what we need to know here is that Butler, the strategy, as we talked to Will Harling 2 days ago, strategy was they were putting fire on the ground up here. They were hoping to create a buffer before this fire ran up out of Butler Creek. And what happened was the fire backed down into here, and let's make these solid so we can see what's going on a little better. So we've got kind of our previous days of contours of spread, and the fire was kind of down to the bottom here, and they were working on burning these ridgetop zones adjacent to this hand line in anticipation that the fire was going to cross down here and it's going to make a slope-driven run. And it made a slope-driven run, and they didn't have enough fire established in here, or the fire wasn't deep enough, and it went over the top here, burned down into this Nordheimer drainage. So it's outside their initial hopeful box. And now, at the same time it ran down in here, it looks like it also spotted into this next drainage here. So I think what we saw happening kind of nuke bomb style today, when we look at our webcam here, 1:30, was I think that this whole drainage probably went up in a big kind of whoosh that you could see as a mushroom cloud. And if we look at the satellite data, the heat satellites, it shows that this area over here is kind of ran off up into the grass and light fuels maybe that are in the 2024 Boise fire. It's still kind of in this larger landscape box of the 2020 salmon complex, red salmon complex, perch fire, Boise fire, but it's not cooperating with their initial strategy. So that's about all we have. I did share some stuff on Facebook today about the burns that happened here at Butler Flat on Will's Place and on some tribal lands across the river. They were able to get that burned yesterday. So as this fire does its thing and backs down towards the community there, they've got a lot of kind of blackened grass and other kind of safer place to operate for firefighters, safer place for people to work out of to protect those structures. So that's Butler. Coming over here to Summit Fire. We also don't have a lot of super new info. The perimeter for this was collected today, but I'm not sure when. That might have been last night. But you can see that the fire has continued to spread through this basin and kind of eaten through all the retardant that I was complaining about yesterday. And the strategy on this flank is just that this flank up here is scree fields and rocky cliffs. And they're showing on the map some sort of hand line out in here, but I think that's probably just like scratching through some of this cliff here to like make sure that the fire can't get through these little teeny stringers. So it sounds like that's a tactical decision that's going to make boot manufacturers happy, because that's some rocky, nasty stuff and tough on those whites. On the other side of this fire, they have been working on a hand line down this ridge, an indirect line that they could fire off of to kind of box this in. We don't have much other new intel on the Summit Fire. Let's see if we turn on the heat there, the heat satellites. Doesn't really tell us much either. Been talking with people about why folks in Scott Valley are so concerned about this particular fire, and that if it got over this divide here into this thick forest, it could cause problems. It could burn downhill through these areas that haven't burned for a long time into the communities down here. It kind of points out the need where you see all these roads here. This is all private timberland that's kind of been picked and plucked and abused for a really long time. And like most places that have really been hammered by logging, that has favored having lots of little small trees and kind of overstock stands that are susceptible to insect, like beetle kill. And so having this kind of sick forest on this private land up against the wilderness, it's kind of one of the reasons that the Forest Service just can't let fires burn in the backcountry politically, is because there is a hazard. There's a hazard that the fire will move down through this land. And then for the private landowner, they're in a pickle because it's really hard to put fire on the landscape at scale without and maintain like full control. And so if the precedent right now is that if this private landowner does a forest fire, does a prescribed burn that turns into a forest fire and goes and burns a bunch of the national forest, then they can get a huge fine that's so huge that they could pretty much be out of business. Kind of interesting overlay to all of this is that this is in a carbon offset. So Eco Trust, Portland kind of nonprofit, is getting paid to grow trees here to absorb carbon from the atmosphere that's put there by polluters like Chevron and other big California carbon dioxide emitters as part of the cap and trade program. So they actually have some cash flow from that carbon money that's supposed to theoretically finance forest management that keeps this from burning up in a forest fire. This land over here is also in that carbon offset, and it burned in last year's Shelley fire. And I don't know if you can see, it looks like this was still kind of smoky when they flew this. I don't think we can really see the severity of that fire on this imagery. But it's a complicated picture, and like letting fires burn in the backcountry, I know that I make it sound like I think it's easy. I know it's not. But what I know is that there's going to be fire here eventually, and it's better, in my opinion, for the fire to come from the top down, from than from it to start down here with an east wind and burn us all with high severity from the head up. And that living here at the bottom of at the edge of the wilderness, there's no free lunch. You can't kind of live there forever and not want smoke, and expect that the forests are just going to heal themselves. And so I think the only way that this is going to get burned, realistically, as a burn boss, is by God lighting fire up here that we can't put out, because there's lots of other starts and the fire's going to back down. It's not going to be the end of the world. But I think that as far as any of us having the courage to put fire on this landscape at the scale that it needs to happen, and to generate the amount of smoke that we're going to generate when we do that, right here in this valley that's full of people, like, it's probably not going to happen. We're probably not going to get a permit to do a 5,000 acre burn right up the hill from Scott Valley. So that's part of admitting that we don't have control of these things at the scale we think we do, and at some point just letting go of that idea that we have control, and letting things like a fire happen. Another thing that came up with, I've been talking about this on Facebook, and someone said, this needs to happen, as big prescribed fire. And I say, well, okay, as a burn boss, if I look at the weather for this point for the next week, and I look at my max temp of not hitting 80, and I look at my minimum RH of only getting down to 31 on one day, and rest time being in the high 30s and 40s, this is barely dry enough for me to do a prescribed burn at the elevation that is actually burning right now. That's why this fire is not spreading very fast, is because the burning conditions aren't conducive right now to major spread in this fuel type. And so when we talk about, like, well, we should do this all as a big prescribed burn, it's like, okay, well, just be aware that we might want to do that in July or August, when people are most scared of fire, because that's when it's appropriate weather-wise. I mean, another big thing that makes it difficult to deal with these sorts of things is that the elevation down here in Scott Valley is 3,000 feet, and the elevation at the fire is 7,000 feet. So you've got a lot different weather, fuel moisture, everything else going down here at the bottom of the hill. And so it's really difficult to thread the needle and to find an opportunity to burn these higher elevations in the weather window that's going to give you a hot enough fire to kill some trees, to clean up the dead and down, without being, and also simultaneously 4 or 5 miles away, in a condition that's not burn season at all. So it's kind of impossible. And so no simple solutions. But I think I want people to know that when I'm flip about, like, they should just let these fires burn, it's like, I know it's complicated. In my mind, when I say that, the calculus is that, hey, you're going to get a fire down here sooner or later. You got a fire now that was lit by God when He wanted it to happen. And the more we fight it and put these out, the more likely we're going to lose this all in a fire that starts at the bottom of the hill. Anyway, it's pretty kind of just basically impossible to thread all these needles. No simple solutions, even if I talk like they are sometimes. Okay, so we're going to jump up to Ashland. And the biggest fires kind of happening right now, as far as the intel is telling us, is the Neal Creek fire and the Demming fire. And so we'll check out Neal Creek first. If you go over Siskiyou Summit, Mount Ashland here, and you drop down, there's the runway truck ramps that, as a kid, I always thought, like, that just captures your imagination. Down at the bottom of the hill here, the Neal Creek fire started last night. Last night I thought it was established in this drainage here, and that it was going to take out this whole drainage. But it turns out it's just kind of on this hillside above the freeway. And they there's kind of a joke that when you call in a fire at night, that you should divide the acreage that you think it is by 5, because things look a lot bigger at night. So last night they thought the fire was 250 acres. They mapped it this morning, and it was more like 150 or something. So if they can hold this fire from crossing, I don't know what it's done today. If they could hold the fire from crossing this creek, they're looking pretty good, because this other side of the road is just this whole other ball game that turns into a fire that burns, that has a potential to burn for weeks. Where here, if they can, get around this, today and tomorrow, it's really good news. So like I said, we don't have as good a fresh intel in Oregon as we have other places, and all we have for you really is these big coarse satellite dots and this perimeter that was shot kind of fairly early today. So that's about all we know about the Neal Creek fire. There's been a lot of fuels work that's been done around Ashland, but Ashland also has got a really insane wildland urban interface. So if we turn on the structures layer here and look at where people live, kind of in the hills above Ashland, there's just a lot of people in harm's way. Just all this stuff kind of up once you get out of the grid streets, even when you are in the grid streets, but it's an issue. So it's been nice to hear that Ashland's been doing a lot of kind of small scale prescribed burning, and a lot of people in here have done a lot of work. You've also got black oak in here that you can see in this kind of October image. You can see all this kind of reddish color. That's all black oak, and black oak, as we've talked about, it's one of the better forest types to live in if you're going to live in the forest, in that you can burn it, you can fires don't haul ass through it. Eventually Ashland's going to have a big fire, and all those people are going to be glad that they spent a lot of money and time on the fuels. But hopefully this fire is not the one that does that. 10 miles off to the west of Ashland, we've got the Demming fire. Demming fire is another one of those ones that look bigger at night. They thought 350 acres yesterday. I think today they're saying maybe it's not quite that. And Demming also kind of ran with slope. And so, as we've been talking about, you get to start. Fires tend to burn to the top of the hill quicker than they burn back down the other side, and they had access on top here. So of all the starts, Oregon Department of Forestry's got a pretty dialed program, and when we look at where all the starts were, all these points out here are fires that have been kept small by a really aggressive initial attack by ODF. Basically, the largest fires are the ones that get mapped. So Demming and Neal Creek got flown. A couple of these fires over here, Hepsi Mountain, Pool Fire, Lagawa. We haven't heard much about those today. We have heard a bit about the Elk Fire, which burned out here on Highway 140 between Klamath Falls and Lakeview. That fire really blew up yesterday and was impressive on the cameras. And when you look at the line here, you can see it took a hard run. I got to take a call real quick here. Someone's got some good info for us. Hey, buddy. Hey, good. I'm on the live stream. Can you give me a quick report? All right. Hey, thanks for waiting. This guy I know who lives kind of right on the edge of the green fire, so we'll jump back there and I'll tell you what he shared with me. Anyway, going back to elk, this fire we were watching it really rage yesterday on the webcams, and we've talked about just how alignment works, and this is like a perfect example of a fire that has alignment, where fire starts, it's in a place where there's wind and a slope directly above it that the wind's going straight up. Interestingly, too, you see that this area that it burned out of just burned last year. You can still see the retardant on the ground when this was flowing last August. But anyway, this is the Elk Fire, and it just kind of like screamed up over this mountain. And most of these fires, a lot of these fires, that's what they do. They do that and then they're done. Because they're kind of going one direction. If you can get in with a dozer, get in with crews or on rolling attack, you can just kind of contain the flanks of the fire and eventually pinch off the head. It's a good time to just talk real quick about interpreting fire history. We'll do that on our way here to the Green Fire. I don't have Oregon fire history loaded up, but let's just load up the California fire history. Check this out, like coming in kind of above Fall River. This is 100 years of fire history. And you just notice that all the fires here kind of get away when you've got a strong southwest wind. They haul ass downwind, and then we put them out. You can even see in here, this we're missing the perimeter for this fire, but you can see the burn scar there in the clear cuts. And so it's like that kind of all the way down, like through Susanville and like around Eagle Lake. You just see this pattern of these kind of little kind of feather-shaped fires where the wind was blown kind of right up the spine of the feather. Even around Quincy. Then you get down here and you have the Dixie Fire, and Dixie Fire is just kind of like, roar, I eat it all. But a lot of places you have that same kind of pattern of shows you, fire history shows you the potential of a landscape, and it shows you what's happened in the past. And it says like, oh, fire wants to start below Round Mountain and scream to Bernie. That's what the weather's doing on bad fire weather days. And you see like Bagley Fire and the other fires out here that they're more kind of round. They're less dominated by the wind because you have this really broken topography. And so these fires kind of tend to grow a little bit more kind of like an onion. But it's always good to kind of, if you're going to move to a place, it's good to understand the fire history. If you're going to move to Round Mountain, Montgomery Creek, you need to understand that the landscape is set up for another fountain fire. And a lot of us in the fire world just think it's a matter of time until you get the next fountain fire. The fuels in this are all the same age now. They're all really super thick. Scary place. So if you live up there, figure out how to do some burning. Get people involved. And there's a lot of good work going on out there for people whacking the fuels. Whack more than you think you need to. And try to get some fire into that. Okay, so anyway, intel just came in from a buddy who lives right here on Fender's Ferry. He's saying that they're hammering on trying to get this dozer line up this ridge. And they're trying to figure out how to get past some rocks kind of midway up this ridge, because if they can't get the dozers up past, I think, probably these rocks here, then they've got to do 2 miles of hand line. And right now, a kind of rule of thumb in fuels that aren't crazy heavy is that a hotshot crew can put in maybe 5,000 acres of, or 5,000 feet of line in a 16-hour shift. So if you need to put in line, but you know those guys are, you got people with chainsaws cutting the way ahead, and you've got 20 people working with purpose to slam in basically a major trail. So 2 miles in this heavy fuels, you might need 3 or 4 crews to get that done in a day. And so that's when we start to run into what we call the resource limitations. Let's see. So we'll see, in the next few days, if they can get this line slammed in, prepped it, and fire it off. One of the hard things, as we've said, about getting fire to get sufficient depth in here is just that the conditions aren't very explosive right now. So where the fire has free reign, as we're seeing over here, sometimes it's only spreading like 200 feet in 12 hours. And so if you're going to try to light this ridge over here in a firing operation, and you want enough depth on your burnout to stop the fire as it comes up the hill, you might want it to, you might want your firing operation to be, 200 or 300 yards off the line. And that can be tough because this country is not, like, it's thick brush, and it's not, like in timber, oftentimes you just line out a bunch of people on a crew with drip torches, 50 to 100 feet apart, and they carry fire across like it's a prescribed burn and establish that black. But when you get into this, old growth poison oak and thick ass brush, it's difficult, especially if the brush isn't burning well. It's not going to be easy for them to light a firing operation, a backfire basically, off of this ridge and get depth to it, just because of the terrain, the fuel type, the time of year. If this was open pine stands and it's all ponderosa pine or grass or something, or out in the desert, it'd be no problem. And they've got all kinds of tricks of shooting incendiary rounds down the hill and to get depth and everything else. But with the conditions that we're under right now, which are either like feast or famine, the fire's either burning with alignment or it's not burning barely at all. Firing's tricky. So I think, to use hotshot terms, it would be strong work. If they're able to slam a line in here, get it burn out sufficiently to halt the fire before it comes down Fender's Ferry Road, be extremely strong work. Otherwise, we go into kind of the long-term big box nightmare, which we saw, say, on the Dixie Fire, where you've got all these dozer lines out here from the Shoot Fire, you got all these dozer lines out here from the Hearst Fire, and then you got people that are going to be out there pioneering a whole bunch of new dozer lines. And then when you get done, oftentimes you got a whole bunch of dozer line inside the fire, because it's easier to put in a dozer line than it is to fire and hold it. And so a lot of times dozer line gets put in regardless of whether or not you have time to put fire on the ground at it or not. So that's your indirect lesson for the day. Someone's saying that elk is blowing up on the Applegate cam, and I believe it. Another thing that when we talked about, that these fires draw a line across the hillside and we put them out. It's like, well, we do that if we have all the resources we need. But if all the resources, all the hotshot crews and Type 1 helicopters and everything are going to save Ashland, then this fire is going places. So let's see if the satellites have anything to say about that. Yeah. Satellites say it's all over the place. All right. Someone says there's a massive fire in Nevada right now. Wildfire 371 says, no more pay to be part of the discussion. I'm coming back. We missed you. Man. Yeah, so if you're just kind of like joining us, we've always had kind of robust participation in the chat, but during the LA fires, there was so much crazy bullshit that was flying around from people that we have never heard of, about space lasers and about the Jews, and just off the wall crazy stuff that we had to shut down the chat to only people that were paying us, which didn't seem right. I think next time it happens, rather than make people pay to be the part of the chat, just probably turn it off, because I can't really work and like debunk and not get pissed and like flustered. So we appreciate all of you who participate, especially you 371. Like, been lots of good comments from you over the years. I was glad to see the same people come back. I'm gonna jump real quick to the web page, do my due diligence here. I've been doing what I can to update each day, put our live stream in here and put in a kind of intel summary. The only problem with that is I I got to figure out how I can do this all and sleep. So when we first started, we were just doing blog posts, and that was it. There was no live stream. And I like having the blog format because I think not everyone wants to watch this for an hour. But we're doing our best to get that stuff updated. And if you're into this stuff and you want to learn more, check out, we just got this huge archive here of all of this stuff. It's like download in my brain from the last 5 years. So check it out, and if you like it, send me some money, because I need to make some money so I can keep doing this. Anyhow, on the topic of money, I'm gonna play my sponsor video, and then I'm gonna bug out of here. Q-Tac, Water Axe, and Firebox. We're gonna do a special Firebox video just on Firebox, because they've got, that's part of their sponsorship. We're gonna do a sponsor video, but they've got great stuff. I really like what they're doing right here, manufacturing this all in America. Check out firebox.com, because I'm a believer, like that stuff. Thanks everyone.